and welcome to another edition of the Climate Conversation. I'm Martin Luecke, the chair of the Windsor Park Neighborhood Association Climate Crisis Committee. And tonight we're talking about efforts here in City of Austin and Travis County for climate mitigation. We have three great guests. First, we have Zach Baumer from the City of Austin, where he manages the climate program in the city's Office of Sustainability. His primary duties include overseeing the implementation of climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies across the city, organization, and community. My co-host, Barrett Sundberg, will introduce our other guest.
Hello, everyone. Barrett Sundberg here, and it is my pleasure to introduce Tom Gleason. He is the Travis County Sustainability Manager. And from reading online, there's an amazing amount of information and things that he'll be able to talk about. So we're really looking forward to this.
And also tonight we have Dr. Thomas Diegen. He has 10 years of experience in techno-economic system modeling for both industry and academic research projects. He is currently working as a researcher at the UT School of Cockrell School of Engineering. He uses computational modeling techniques to explore issues at the intersection of technology, policy, environment, and economics. And his work focuses on energy topics with particular interest in renewables, integration, building energy efficiency, thermal energy storage, and hydrogen economies. Welcome, Dr. Deetjen. And you sound like you're in the right room with all of us here. So let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. First, let's find out from Zach, what is the City of Austin doing about climate change?
Well, it's a big question. Let's see. So it goes all the way back to 2007. The City Council back in 2007 passed the initial council resolutions addressing climate change. The major thing that the city first focused on was setting renewable energy targets for Austin Energy. So that started back in 2007. And let's see, I started the city in 2011. So I've been working on this for 10 years now. And the main policy and plan that we have is called the Austin Community Climate Plan. And that's all situated and organized around the city's long-term climate goal. So right now, that goal is for community-wide emissions. So to direct emissions from me and you and all the businesses and Austin Energy and all the transportation, all the vehicles, all the waste, everything. Aiming to get those emissions to net zero or as close to zero as possible by 2050. So back in 2014-15, we created the first plan to sort of get us pointed in the right direction and dive into the details on what should the city be doing, what should the community be doing, et cetera. We have just gone through a revision process on that plan. So 2019 and 20, we worked with lots of community stakeholders to create a new version of that plan. So the new version is called the Climate Equity Plan. It's the draft is available for viewing on Speak Up Austin. And the new plan tries to make the goal for zero emissions more aggressive. So it essentially is bumping up the target to aim for net zero community-wide emissions by 2040. So that plan will be going in front of City Council sometime in 2021, probably later this summer. And essentially sets forth all sorts of different strategies focused on energy usage, renewable energy, buildings, transportation, electric vehicles, waste and consumption of goods and products, natural systems. It focuses on kind of all the areas where we're emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, like directly in the Austin area.
Gotcha. So it's a really large, complicated thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that plan, the new climate equity plan is 100 pages long. I mean, it's not
okay. Tom Gleason from Travis County. Does that sound familiar? Is that the same thing y'all are working on?
Yeah, I mean, we're here talking about climate change, so I think it's only appropriate that to combat a multifaceted, very complex issue that's going to require actions from all over the place, from all over the community, different sectors of businesses, governments, individuals. We're going to have to come at it from every angle in order to combat climate change. And certainly at Travis County, we're thankful to have a collaborative working relationship with the city of Austin. So our staff helped in the development of the climate equity plan, and we're thankful for Zach and his team and all their leadership in that arena. Within the Travis County sphere of influence, for our internal operations, we've passed our own climate action plan looking at county operations and how we can make strides in that realm. We've through the leadership of our commissioners court, have passed a net zero resolution. So for Travis County operations to be carbon neutral by 2030, as well as a carbon neutrality goal for our broader Travis County community. We have an environmentally preferable purchasing policy to make sure that we are putting our money where our mouth is in terms of finding sustainable products and buying things that aren't further worsening the problem. We have an annual sustainability report where we highlight how we as an organization have done, what our energy consumption was, water consumption, how that compares to previous years. We include our greenhouse gas inventory so that we can see the progress that we're making towards these goals. And a small but meaningful victory just yesterday. Our Commissioners Court passed a resolution joining the Lights Out Texas initiative. And for those who don't know, that's an initiative where we're asking residents and businesses from April 19th to May 7th, and I hope I have those dates right, but asking folks to turn off lights, so light pollution impacts migratory birds, and we have more than more than a third of migratory birds are passing through Texas during those peak migration periods. So we want to turn out as many lights as possible, try and eliminate light pollution where we can, and send them on their way safely. And small victory for the climate: when we turn off the lights, we save energy, we save pollution.
Roger that. So in that realm, Dr. Deetjen, I noticed that one of your current projects is decarbonization scenarios for Texas. And it looks like the city of Austin and Travis County are working on that. From your perspective as a researcher, what are you finding?
Yeah, so the study you're mentioning is it's looking at all of Texas for a 2050 net zero carbon emissions plan. And that should come out in the next month or so, being published by the research group under Dr. Michael Weber, also in engineering. But some of the things we're trying to do is do a number of different scenarios of what it might take to get to zero and see what some of those scenarios have in common. So a big thing is clean electricity. Another big thing is energy efficiency. And another thing is some industrial tools for cleaning up industrial emissions. So I think that Zach can at least talk about those are all in Austin's climate plan, and I'm not sure about Travis County, but something else the two of them could talk about. I've read a number of climate plans and done some sort of a rubric to see how they compare to each other, and Austin is very good compared to a lot of cities. So it's good to know that we're in a place that is thinking about these things and doing a good job coming up with plans to attack them. Two things that we could talk about is the fact that Zach and Tom are both here. There is cooperation between Austin and Travis County and other cities too. So a lot of this city level climate action planning takes a number of different jurisdictions to be helping each other because a lot of climate issues obviously go much wider than the boundary of a city. And then another thing that Tom mentioned is that they are being specific and thoughtful about their accounting methods. So
Tom, I wondered about that as far as measurement. I noticed that on Travis County's own website, there's been reports published since 2012, and they have a lot of information in them. How did that come about, and how has it affected what the county has actually done?
Yes, and we've actually, gosh, was it 2018? I think we went kind of undertook a restructuring of those reports. They were generally focused on solid waste management and recycling, and we've transitioned those to be more holistic, to look at, total county operations and see, what we're doing. And I think it's important to, each piece of the report should be something significant, something that we want to measure, something that we want to bring in front of the commissioner's court on a regular basis and say, this is how we're doing in these areas. So we've made sure to, to include a greenhouse gas inventory, to include numbers on our sustainable purchasing, to include energy consumption. And then as much as possible, we try and relate that back to the individual employee and say, our electricity cost is X dollars per employee, because we want each employee to feel like they have the opportunity to impact that and be a part of that equation.
So I was looking at the City of Austin data on their community climate plan, and it shows that this plan really was started in 2017, numbers wise, and there was this goal of reducing our output by 2020 to 11.3 million metric tons, by 2030 to 8 million metric tons. And I'm wondering, so we're at 2021. Did we actually meet the goal, Zach, of being down to 11.3 last year? Is that something that happened?
Yeah, so we don't have the exact numbers on the community-wide inventory yet. So when we do a community-wide inventory, we're getting really high-level aggregated data on transportation. We're getting emissions data from power plants. We're getting data that's reported to the EPA. We're getting all of these really high-level data sources. And all of that data doesn't come in until like a year later. So later this year, probably by the end of 2021 or early 2022, we'll know the exact numbers on 2020. But we do know that we are, here, I can share my screen. I mean, we do know, and there are links to this through our website. I'm not going to share my screen. It's just going to make it more complicated. I mean, we do know that we're down to at least 12 million metric tons in 2018. So in the key area where we've been getting the reductions, the early reductions in our plan, have been from Austin Energy stack emissions. So as Austin Energy has implemented their new resource plans over the course of the last decade, we have been using less and less fossil fuel energy and using more and more renewable energy. And basically through implementing those plans and those two things happening, the community-wide and like the footprint from our electricity has been shrinking. And it is expected to shrink even more dramatically over the next like 5 to 10 years.
Why is that? I'm curious. Why is it going to keep shrinking?
Oh, because they are just going to keep getting out and getting out of more and more fossil fuel generation resources and getting into more and more renewables. So the plan now is by the end of, I think, 2021, the Decker power plant is set to start decommissioning. And then I think in 2022 or 2023, our portion of the Fayette power plant is set to phase out. So when those are
tell me if I'm catching up on this. Is Decker runs on natural gas and Fayette runs on coal? And so both of those are going out in the next few years?
Yeah. And so
And then,
the only fossil generation that we'll be left with is Sand Hill. And so the Sand Hill power plant, sort of down by the airport off 71, that is a newer combined cycle natural gas plant.
and so what are the main sources of the other energy that we're now increasingly getting? Is it mostly wind from West Texas? Is it, how much is solar? Where are these mostly located?
Yeah. I can link you after the meeting to all the details on this on the Austin Energy website. But so a portion of the portfolio is the South Texas Project nuclear plant. So there's that portion. And then the majority of the additions are West Texas solar and then wind from multiple areas in the state. So coastal wind as well as West Texas wind.
Is most of this, I don't want to get too much detail, I'm just curious on this piece. Is most of it that's coming in like big contracts where you're actually working with some company to build a set of windmills or solar, install solar panels, or is it like bought on the spot market, as they say? How's it?
So it's kind of happening in three ways. So the first way is local solar. So I have solar in my house. I get a rebate from Austin Energy. Austin Energy incentivizes solar on businesses and homes in Austin. The second area is Austin Energy has been working to build what they call community solar, which are megawatt scale, 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, like, but not huge. That scale of solar on buildings like the Baumer Event Center. There's a ground-mounted site on the east side on an airport parking garage. There's that program where they're investing in working with a company to build the solar, and then customers buy in and buy directly. Essentially sign up like as a subscription to be community solar members.
Is this the Green Choice program or something else?
Something else. It's a program called Community Solar.
Okay.
And then the big stuff, those are PPAs. So power purchase agreements where there's a company who leases the land, puts in the solar panels, builds the 100 megawatts of solar. And then Austin Energy essentially buys a contract to own to take every kilowatt of energy once it's generated off that plant. So we're not the true owners because and the reason for that is the federal tax credit system, that Austin Energy doesn't pay federal taxes. So you work with a company that does pay federal taxes. But because we're buying every single kilowatt the second that it leaves the plant, we essentially own it. So large PPAs is how the vast majority of the renewables sort of come online and like are integrated into Austin Energy's utility system.
So the city's actions here are really creating new renewable sources. We're not just buying it from somewhere, we're really building it, causing this stuff to be built, basically.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then in in Travis County's plans, I noticed, Tom, that the county mentions that it supports Austin Energy's generation plans. Basically, what is the county's role in this? Does it join in some of these agreements or kind of support it in some other way? How does that interaction work?
Yeah, that is a goal that we have, or at least that I have for Travis County. So exactly like Zach is mentioning, it's not just plugging into something that's already out there or doing the accounting in a way that you get credit for wind out in West Texas or, a solar plant, out near the airport. It's actually, driving that demand. And unfortunately, we're not in that position just yet. So that is a goal that we are hopefully working towards. And again, with our commitment that we have for net zero operations from Travis County, that is something that I will be, that we'll be holding ourselves accountable for, and, information that we make public so that, Travis County residents can also help hold us accountable. Because that's something that's important to us that we want to see. And, we don't want to be creating that demand for fossil fuel generated power. I mean, in order to combat climate change, fossil fuels has to be out of the equation.
When I started opening the Travis County's plan online, just clicking on and reading what was there, I was initially thinking about greenhouse gases from power generation and things like that, but it's much broader than that, as both of you alluded to earlier. Can you tell us about some of the areas where Travis County is focused, and a couple of other types of things it's doing that are not about power generation, but very different types of initiatives?
Absolutely. And, our annual sustainability report, again, is, sustainability is broad. That's, we're talking about, we're talking about people, we're talking about operations, we're talking about purchasing. And I'm going to share my screen and hope that I don't cause everything to collapse. But here's our 2019 report. And so, just running through the table of contents, you can see, again, what we measure indicates priorities. And so, these are the different areas that we're focused on as an organization and reducing our impacts in each of these areas. So I'll just jump to recycling and waste diversion. And, I do a huge data dump, and I feel a little bit guilty every time I present this information to our commissioners court. But, we have all of this information, recycling costs, recycling revenues, what we're disposing of, recycling by materials, and, how we're doing in all of these areas, and different indicators of success, or different areas where we could do better. Again, with we have commentary in here, so that there is context for just, there's a ton of numbers that we're throwing at you, but our diversion rate in the 2019 report, we were less than 30% diversion, and nationally, the U.S. average is above 40%. So we have a lot of room for improvement, and I will look to the leadership of our elected officials and say, here's where we are, here's where everybody else is. Do we want to be at the back of the pack, or do we want to be at the front of the pack? And then we'll also work with staff and do, employee engagement, resident engagement, to do what we can on our end. It really is that kind of top down and bottom up approach to drive change in the different areas.
Tell us what the diversion rate actually means.
Oh gosh. So the way we measured it was, I'll get into the weeds. Diversion rate is everything, if you think about your house. So, outside your house and Windsor Park, you have your gray or brown bin for landfill trash, you have your blue bin for recycling, and your green bin for composting. And so everything that you're putting into the blue bin and the green bin, that would be diversion. And then whatever the total is, you basically put diversion on top of everything generated. So let's use nice round numbers, 33 1/3 pounds in each bin. So 33 1/3 pounds of trash, recycling, compost. If you're doing, so you have a 66% diversion rate, because you're putting more in those other two bins than you are in your trash bins.
Gotcha. Okay.
So does doing that help the environment because there's less pollution, because it's being better used by being composted or something like that? Does it also have a kind of a greenhouse gas effect somehow? Just, I understand these are very general questions, but.
No, I mean, I think those are relevant questions. We want everybody to understand how this all interacts. And I'd point back to our greenhouse gas inventory that's included in part of the report, because it shows you where the emissions are coming from. So solid waste is a part of our greenhouse gas inventory and part of our emissions, but the vast majority of our emissions actually come from buildings and the electricity that's consumed to run our buildings, which is then tied back to coal and natural gas power plants, so the burning of fossil fuels. So all of these things add up, but where we could make the biggest impact is going to be in the buildings and facilities realms, working on energy efficiency, working on getting, changing the power sources that we're getting for our facilities, and reducing our overall consumption.
That brings up the idea of energy loss in buildings. And I think, Dr. Deetjen, you've been doing research on this. What are you finding? Is it all about building materials, or what's research showing?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. I have a couple comments before we move on, though, that I think would be helpful. Something we could think about as we're talking here is, what do cities have control over or jurisdiction over, if you want to put it that way? A lot of times the really big things that impact climate change are not necessarily in the jurisdiction of a city. So the power sector is the main one that we think of first. Austin Energy is rare that a city owns its own utility. So Austin actually has a decent amount of impact over the power sector. Most cities don't have hardly any, besides the first two things that Zach was talking about, which are local solar and community solar if they have room for it. But the ability of Austin Energy to buy these contracts with solar farms that actually helps the farm get built, that's pretty important. And Tom can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Travis County has quite the same influence, which means that for Travis County to make impacts on the power sector emissions, they need to work closely with the utilities and the co-ops that operate in Travis County and try and get them on board with this broader plan to reduce power sector emissions. But then we have things like waste management, which is very much in the control of most cities. And it may show up as a smaller item on the list of things that cause greenhouse gases, but it's typically something that is reasonably affordable, and there are a lot of good benefits to doing it just besides the climate impacts. And cities have a lot of levers they can pull to make that happen. So I think as we talk, we can keep thinking in mind of what cities are able to do and what kind of impacts those things can have. As far as buildings go, that's kind of an area where cities have a medium amount of influence, and it is an area where there could be a lot of contribution. So the way to think about buildings is mostly, they do produce greenhouse gases if you're burning natural gas in your house, or propane, for example. If you have a reasonably efficient water heater, cooktop, and heater, then those emissions aren't going to be extreme. But the most energy we consume, at least in Texas buildings, is for air conditioning and keeping our buildings at temperature that we want them to be. The biggest influence cities have over that is the building codes, and they have typically a pretty good amount of influence over what the building codes are. That only goes so far, because those tend to apply to new buildings or to people that are upgrading their existing buildings. So having good buildings codes is something that may take decades to really have a lot of impact. But Austin has done some other interesting things in the area of building energy efficiency. For example, Zach can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you list your house for sale, you have to get an energy audit of your house. So when someone buys your house, they have an idea of whether or not your house is very efficient. But yeah, I mean, energy efficiency plays a huge role, because here's one example. Let's say you use 1 unit of cooling of energy to cool your house. That a unit of energy came over power lines, and there were a little bit of losses on the way there because some of that energy burns up as it transmits over the lines. That energy came from a power plant that had to send it through a generator, after it sent it through a steam turbine, after it burned it in a boiler. So when you work your way all the way back to the coal or natural gas energy units that it took to do 1 unit of cooling, it could be 4 or 5 or 6 units of energy going into the power plant to get you 1 energy of cooling at your house. And what that really means is that if you can reduce the cooling in your house by 10%, you may reduce the fuel consumption in a power plant, by 50% of what it had been burning to power your house for cooling. Now it has to do a lot less. So that can have a huge impact, and it's something that Austin has a good influence over, and it's something that particularly your residents and homeowners have a lot of influence over too.
So that means all of you out there in resident homeowner land, like Windsor Park, insulate your house, basically.
Yeah, and Windsor Park's a good example because, these are 50s, 60s, 70s houses. So a lot of the quality of the construction is good, but they may not have been as insulated as well as they are, modern houses that get built. And then I know the windows in a lot of houses are still single pane windows, and that can be a big deal too. But there's kind of a variety of cheap to very expensive energy efficiency things you can do to your house. So for any budget, there's good stuff you can do that will save you money, make your house more comfortable. And since you're reducing energy consumption, it will reduce climate impacts too.
We have a volunteer who's helping us on this broadcast. Selwyn Pollitt does many things behind the scenes on the computer side and is kind of running the board, making sure all of these images are coming up cleanly, that the Facebook is working and so on. He is actually running on power from solar cells on his roof. Is that still something that the city can work with people on? Is that integrated into the power system itself? How does that work?
Yeah, if you're in Austin Energy's territory, you can go to austinenergy.com and call a local solar company and get solar put on your house and get a rebate from Austin Energy to get the solar installed on your house. And then they will pay you for the electricity that your solar panels generate. The way that solar works and the way that your house works, the sun is almost down now, so solar panels are making basically zero energy. So right now you're getting power from the grid, but during the middle of the day today, my solar panels were making more energy than my house was using. So the solar panel was going out into the lines in my neighborhood and being used, around here. But the good thing is that when you have the 2 meters on your house, Austin Energy pays you back for every kilowatt hour of solar that was generated. So just like the energy efficiency measures that Thomas was talking about, the good thing now with most things related to energy efficiency and solar is that these are things that pay back. These are good financial choices. They're good for the climate. They're just all around sort of win-win choices for homeowners these days.
I just want to mention to some of our viewers, we are taking questions over Facebook, and assuming that is working successfully, we'd like to pass on your questions. I'm going to pass one that has been answered privately. I'm going to share it with the viewers. Someone himself actually had a question. He said he's heard, this was back when we were talking about recycling. He said, I've heard that recycling doesn't actually happen, that it all goes into the landfill. Is there any truth to that, or is there an urban legend? Tom, should I quote you? Is that right? Tom texted us back, well, that urban legend is 100% garbage, which I thought was an amusing reply because it's a great pun. Just ask our local recycling centers. He said they depend on recycling to keep their business running. So I'm glad to know the system is actually working. And thanks for that reply. But viewers, please do send questions and we will try and bring them up if at all possible.
Tom, I'm curious now, how many recycling centers do we have?
And I think Zach wants to comment as well. So
you can see one, and you can see the recycling happening. If you go out 290 just past Windsor Park and hit Johnny Morris Road and turn right on Johnny Morris Road, the Balcones materials recovery facility is right there. And it's got, it's a huge warehouse. You can see into it from the street. It's so big. And that's where the recycling sorting is happening.
And I think that it is a common misconception, and there is a lot of questions about recycling. I know Planet Money has done a great podcast about it. There's another podcast I like called How to Save a Planet. and they talk about recycling and what goes on there. And I really loved what they talked about, because there's a lot of concern about inefficiencies in the recycling system and what happens with all these materials. And it would be easy just to make that a binary decision. Does it happen or does it not? Yes or no. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And a lot of the challenges come when we look at plastics recycling. An aluminum can has been the poster child of recycling forever. I think when you recycle an aluminum can, it can be back on a shelf, I think within like a month. Huge energy savings through aluminum can recycling. There's an old statistic, I don't know how relevant it is now with new TVs, but something like if you recycle aluminum can, you've saved enough energy to power your TV for 3 hours. Glass bottles can be recycled infinitely, and comes from sand, comes from natural materials. Paper, cardboard, great for recycling. Where recycling gets a little trickier is when we get into the plastics realm. And again, we're talking about fossil fuels. And, so we have kind of two crises linked together. You have the plastics pollution crisis and you have the climate crisis, and you try and trace that back to the source, and seems to be a fossil fuel generated issue.
Yeah, and we don't even want to get into the subject of what's going into the ocean at this point, but plastics certainly are a major problem. I wanted to shift gears a little bit because we were talking about renewable energies and solar, et cetera. And I think the main issue we have right now, and something that became painfully obvious in the February freeze that we had here, that we need to store our renewable energy. We need to build, in my opinion, these gigawatt plants to actually have a background of just nonstop energy that's always available. Is anybody going to be doing that? Is anybody planning any kind of large scale, industrial scale, or what do they call it, utility scale battery plants?
I'm going to punt to Dr. Deetjen, but I do just want to say, I think we like to look for the big, sexy solutions. Like, let's get this huge, awesome Tesla battery. Very cool. I'm on board with it. But also, let's talk about Tesla's less sexy cousin, energy efficiency, and, insulating your attic and caulking your windows and all that.
That's a great answer. Like, again, an issue with batteries and all energy storage is that when you charge the battery and then you discharge the battery, you just lost about 10% of the energy. So it is better if we can just use that energy correctly the first time. Now, what Martin's getting at is basically the idea that if we're going to have a lot of wind and solar out there, it doesn't produce wind and solar at the times that we need it necessarily. So wind is notorious for producing most at nighttime in the winter, and our demand peaks mostly in the daytime during the summer. So there's a mismatch there. Batteries obviously can help with that quite a bit. There are other strategies too, though. So there are ways that we consume electricity that we don't necessarily care what time of day that happens. So a great example is like your dishwasher. If your dishwasher runs at 10 p.m. or 4 a.m., it doesn't really matter as long as your dishes are clean when you're ready to put them back in the cupboard. And there are other examples of that, both in, at home and in commercial buildings in the industrial sector, where we can change the time that we consume demand to align better with wind and solar. And that gets a lot into electricity markets and prices people get at different kinds of day and that kind of thing. But again, that only goes so far too. So storage definitely plays a role in what those kind of things can't do. So I think Tom was also getting at, it's helpful to have a lot of different solutions to combine together and make that happen. And one big issue that is yet to be solved is that I mentioned in summer is when our peak demand happens, and in winter is when wind is mostly blowing. So there's a seasonal issue there. And as good as batteries can get, it's not good to store 6 months of energy in there. So we're looking for other solutions to store that energy for long periods of time.
In your research,
I'm glad you mentioned the different solutions. We have a question from Susan, another viewer. And she asked, a couple years ago, some solar consultants said that if you have trees shading your roof, your carbon impact is better keeping the trees than cutting them and installing solar at your individual house. Do you agree? She asks.
So yeah, there's a few things going on there. I mean, having great shade trees over your roof in the summer makes a big impact on the energy you're consuming for cooling. And you know, rooftop solar should be lower on your list, I think, of things to invest in. It should be lower on your list than energy efficiency, than smart thermostats, and some of these other things. And I see she also mentions in her question about community solar. Dollar for dollar, you're going to have a more positive impact on climate change by investing in community solar than you will by putting it on your roof, because putting it on your roof is going to cost, Zach may know, 30%, 40% more than chipping into a community project where the economies of scale are going to be a lot bigger. And then there's also the ecology aspect of keeping trees around for habitat. And we're learning more that habitat and natural systems play an important part in climate change too. It's not, you know, climate change is not just isolated to greenhouse gases, but there's a lot of things, playing into that.
Zach, you want to jump in there? You were raising your hand for a second.
Yeah, well, the place I was going to jump in was the one thing that we haven't brought up and talked about at all yet is transportation. So the second biggest sector of emissions, which in Austin, like next year, is going to be the biggest sector of emissions, is transportation. So that's all the gasoline and the diesel, moving all the cars and the trucks around our city all day, every day, all night, constantly. And then the other, you brought up batteries, the other sort of interesting connection with sort of the solutions to transportation are getting, number one, just not using a car. So getting on public transportation, walking, biking, avoiding a trip altogether. That's the best thing. But more and more, we realize that because of the way our city is designed, the way that our city is sprawled, and having so much renewable energy coming from Austin Energy, electric vehicles are going to have to be part of the solution for us to get to zero emissions in Austin. So, you know, the biggest batteries that are around right now are in cars. So I have a Chevy Bolt. It has a 66 kilowatt hour battery. So during the storm, I was lucky, during the winter storm, I was lucky my power didn't go out. But if my power would have gone out, sitting in my garage was 66 kilowatt hours of stored electricity that I couldn't use because we currently sort of don't have the setup and the technology and like it doesn't work to connect my car to my house and run my house. But in the future, that may be a thing that happens. Like you may charge your car up a few days leading up to the winter storm, and then you may use that electricity when you need it. So just another interesting connection, like an area where we're getting close to reality. Like we're getting there. We don't actually have the exact solution yet, but it's close.
Dr. Deetjen, do you have any research in that arena of your car and being part of the system?
I think Zach said it pretty well. I mean, it is an ongoing area. There's, you know, engineering controls and how do we make sure the voltage and frequency of the electricity stay where we wanted and some things like that. But it's certainly something that's feasible and it can be done today. It's just not very common. But the scale of doing it potentially could be huge. I mean, Zach's talking about, you know, a solid day or two of electricity power for your house if you're being conservative. That's a lot. So the idea that there could be, you know, every other household maybe has an electric car someday that's capable of doing this kind of thing, it could be pretty powerful. And then another aspect of that is that there are still parts of the US where if you switch from a gas car to an electric vehicle, you actually increase your emissions just because the power sector is dirty. So I think the Midwest is one of these places and the Rust Belt. But in Texas, I think we're past the point where doing that has a positive impact on emissions. And certainly going forward, Texas emissions will continue to drop. So if you think of the lifetime of an electric vehicle, If you buy one now, your lifetime emissions impact are going to be lower than if you kept onto your efficient gasoline car.
And I'm assuming that when it comes to fleets of vehicles like the county and the city have, eventually when you get to the point where you have all of them being electric, I'm assuming we now have electric buses, but the same can be said for all of these systems being plugged in all at the same time. They kind of can work together. That's, I'm assuming, a goal.
Yeah, theoretically, yes, it can happen. There's a lot of, yeah, I mean, there's a number of different things that need to be figured out before that works seamlessly. But from an engineering viewpoint, it's certainly possible. Yeah.
Tom or Zach, are y'all looking at those things also, or is it way too early for that conversation?
No, it is at the city. So we have an electric vehicle plan, a plan to roll electric vehicles into the city vehicle fleet. The city currently owns and operates, I think, over 250 electric vehicles. But right now, those are just sedans. I mean, part of the challenge with the city vehicle fleet is that you've got police cars, you've got a lot of pickup trucks, you've got, dump trucks, you've got all sorts of different uses that don't all have an electric solution that can work for them right now. But what you were mentioning about being able to use a vehicle fleet like as a gigantic battery, the closest thing we're probably getting to that is Cap Metro. So Cap Metro also has a plan to electrify their bus fleet. And up on Barrett Road, like just north of 183, sort of like on your way to the domain, there's an old like abandoned mattress factory thing where Cap Metro owns that site. And they are totally converting that site to be like their new electric bus depot, where in the coming years, I think they have like less than 5 electric buses right now. But say in the next 10 years, they may have 50 to 100 or even more electric buses in their fleet. So when you have all those buses in one place and you have them all going to this home every night and charging throughout the day, there's going to be a lot of electricity going into that site to charge those buses. And the batteries on those buses are huge. I mean, they're like 300 kilowatt hour batteries. I mean, massive batteries where you line up, 10 buses or 100 buses that have 300 kilowatt hours of electricity, and you're talking like megawatts of power. So it's on down the line.
We're getting a lot of good questions that you guys are stimulating from our viewers, and there's kind of 2 different lines that both come to one question. One is simply about different vehicles and their effect. Susan asks, do you have a second favorite plug-in hybrid electric vehicle since they stopped making the Chevy Volt?
I don't have my favorite one is at this point is just to go full electric. There's lots of different plug-in electrics that they make right now. There's a Mitsubishi one, there's a Toyota one, there's numerous different plug-in electric cars that they make. But it seems like we're hitting this strange point where those sort of came in, and it's like as soon as they started like most of the manufacturers making one, most of the manufacturers are sort of jumping to full battery electric.
So the question of, is it fleets or how much impact do our individual cars have is a big question. In some of the chat, the information was, the idea was already brought up that on some level, every person has a part to play, but the biggest impacts are systems level, and individuals can drive systems change. Can each of you address that, and how can people listening to this broadcast drive systems change? All these topics.
I think maybe the place to start is that there are a lot of positive things we can do to help the climate that have other benefits. So if we just want to talk about electric cars for a second, We've already talked about some of the potential reliability benefits if you have a setup where you can use your car to provide you power when your power is out. So there's a benefit. Electric cars last longer. They don't need oil changes. They accelerate faster, so they're more fun to drive. And there are other benefits you can stack on there as well. When you get into energy efficiency for your house, that's a little more obvious. You obviously save money on your electricity bills when you're not consuming as much, but your house will be more comfortable. You can set your thermostat at a different level and not, have the wind blowing on you as much. So yes, if your priority is environment, there are a lot of good environmental reasons to do these things. But as an individual, you get a lot of personal benefits from contributing to some of these solutions also. And then from a systems level or a community level, there's some research out there about how it mostly looks at solar panels. So it shows how people who have neighbors or friends down the street that have solar panels are more likely to buy solar panels themselves. So there's certainly a cultural aspect of energy efficiency and climate change mitigation that when you do something, the people around you notice that, and it feels more normal to them to do something also.
So similarly, if we tell our neighbors, wow, I really like being on Green Choice Energy, where I sign up for all of my electricity from the city to be supporting more of these building of renewable facilities, that might influence people too. Is that?
Yeah, but I think the trick is that you need to actually see it. So maybe you can get a Green Choice, yard sign or something.
That is a great idea. I like that. I'm going to go get one. I'm going to make one. That's what I'm going to do. I've been on the Green Choice program since it was invented in 2003. And we did a calculation recently. In our group, we built a calculator, a carbon footprint reduction calculator. And these things that you do to reduce your carbon footprint, we have 10 choices. One of them is the Green Choice. And we backdated mine to 2003 when it turned on, and the amount of carbon that has been saved just by doing that in my household was stunning. It was an enormous number. And that's just one person doing that. And I've been telling everyone, please sign up for Green Choice. But Zach, now you're saying there's community version. Is this a different name, a new program? What is that?
Well, Green Choice is like very big picture. Green Choice is renewable energy credits from the market, and you're just like buying the attribute of the renewable energy. The idea with community solar is just what Thomas is saying. You can actually go and see where the solar is being generated. And so you're actually a little bit more closely participating in the solar market without actually having the panels on your house.
So that's where like a set of solar panels are put up somewhere near our city, and that is serving this community, like a neighborhood or the city or something. And we've actually built the new thing, and you could go look at it.
Yep. Yes.
And you said earlier that was a part of what the city's already doing.
Yeah, as people sign up for community solar is people have to sign up for it, and they build as much capacity as people sign up for.
So where do we sign up for this, since it's different from Green Choice, which is what Martin and I have both been individually on for a while. So where would we sign up for this?
I think if you just Google Austin Energy Community Solar, we can probably find it. Yeah, it's right there.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just Google Austin Energy Community Solar, you can see the whole deal right there.
Didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yep.
We have
back to the other
a Zoom chat that people are replying to and chatting on. I don't think it's visible to the people on Facebook. So that link was posted, but at least it should be searchable. I think we can try and post that later. We'll try and post it on the Windsor Park Carbon Shrinker calculator that we referred to, which is on Facebook as well, just like this is streaming on Facebook Live. So viewers, keep the information coming, and we'll try and get out as much as we can to you. Go ahead, King.
Zach, did you have something else?
Well, I was just going to jump in back to like the system question, the individual question. At this point in the fight, to stop climate change, all of the things have to be happening. We need to be making the systems changes. Every individual needs to be making changes. We need to be doing all the things. And whether it's transportation or it's energy or it's waste, the systems and the individuals connect, right? Like our systems can make policies and programs, but individuals have to step up to the plate and take the action, because every single one of us is using fossil fuels and has a role to play. So the answer is both. And at this stage in the climate game, like it's getting to the point where all the things have to happen at one time. Like it's not really a pick or choose your favorite climate solution at this point. Like it all needs to happen.
I was
So,
noticing on the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, strategy number 3, promote behavior change, which includes expanding your educational efforts. So city and county educational efforts, I'm assuming, is going to be public outreach. Are there plans for that? Is it already happening?
Yeah, we already do lots of outreach, but it's just going to continue, and there's just going to be more and more. So if you go to austintexas.gov, climate change or Office of Sustainability, you can find tons of materials there. We do lots of outreach, lots of presentations to people. But it's a never-ending battle. I mean, there's a lot of people in this city, and it's hard for local government to reach every single individual. Tom, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, preach, keep going, nailed it, Zach. We need to do all the things, and I think Zach and I are both here. Like this is, if you can't find it on our website and there's not an opportunity to engage with us, let us know. We'll come to you. That's the level of service we're trying to provide. I don't know how scalable that is. Don't quote me, but we want to do our best to get the information in the hands of the folks who want it. I'll do a shameless plug. Next week, each day, our Travis County commissioners are doing a different event for Earth Day. So we're doing a week-long celebration. And so that's an opportunity to engage with an elected official and tell them, you want to see change in the area of, fighting climate change, additional, added resiliency. To the systems question, it's great if you have an electric car and solar panels on your house and you don't eat beef anymore, but it's even better if you can get your neighbors, get your friends, get your families, help drive change for other people, kind of that domino effect, or almost like a environmental pyramid scheme, except we just want a better life for everybody. So it's not just what you do, and it's not about being perfect all the time. It's about doing all the things when you can.
Dr. Deetjen,
appreciate that comment. It's a perfect closing, and I know that we're approaching our planned time. I want to make sure that each of the other panelists has a chance for a kind of closing remark as well.
We'll start with Dr. Deetjen. You're doing a lot of research in energy, and education is now a big thing that we're talking about. What's the University of Texas doing in that arena?
I mean, the first thing I wanted to say is when you asked, how are you guys, Travis County and Austin, doing outreach? I wanted to say they're doing it right now on this podcast. Yeah, I mean, UT is also interested in reaching out to the community. So I think academics see it as a big part of their mission to help people understand what's coming next and what kind of things they can be doing to understand what research is happening and how that may impact their lives. So I think we've touched on a lot of good stuff today on practical ways we can apply some of the stuff that we're researching now or that have been researched in the past decade or two. And we're learning a lot more about how these things can impact climate change and energy consumption and a lot of that kind of thing.
All right, Tom, any last words?
Yeah, I just appreciate the work that y'all are doing to bring people together. It's not always about the big fancy solutions. Sometimes it's sitting in the dark to save a little bit of energy, riding the bus, walking around. So I think, again, pointing back to Zach, he nailed it. Do all the things. We need it. So you know, I will be doing all the things on my end and hope to see the same from our community.
Brilliant. Thank you. Zach, one last thought there. Everything is everything.
Yeah, I think one last thought would be talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors about this, and make sure that you're in the game. And, you know, this neighborhood association level is fantastic for that because, you know, those are the people that are around you, that you trust, that you listen to, or your peers, or the people you spend time with. And I feel like a lot of change can be made at that level because there's trust, and there's direct, real communication between people. So keep up this neighborhood work, and everybody's got a role to play.
Thank you. Barrett, any last words on our program tonight?
I just want to thank our viewers because it is a community effort, and you're very important. I'm thrilled we have such excellent panelists. I think we've had a really good discussion. We've reached nearly all of the questions, and we'll look for an opportunity to make sure and keep including them in future discussions as well. So thanks for everyone for tuning in. And if you're catching this later on YouTube, very glad to have any information, to have you listening and submitting any further comments for us.
And also, I'd like to thank Selwyn Pollitt for running the board for us and keeping everything going, and also Francie Manning for bringing us the questions. And I thank you for joining us again. And we will be back in a couple of months with another look at the climate conversation. Thank you and good night. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.